What housing policy existed in the past in Canada?
Well, the this has been a kind of part of the whole discussion, and interestingly enough, we've landed the first time since I can remember where we're actually talking about homelessness in a federal election currently. But what the big thing that kind of when we think of a macro level policy that is behind the kind of a major driver of rising homelessness in the last quite frankly in the last 30 years is the stoppage of creating building affordable housing, and particularly social housing. We just let the market kind of flounder, and we stopped the building. And maybe there was the thinking that the private sector would take up, and there would be low end rentals for people and so on. But essentially in the 80s and early 90s, it was the end of that era, and so that ever since I've been involved in this area of homelessness, there's certainly recognition that the first thing you need to do to help people get out of homelessness, but also to prevent homelessness, and from growing, is you need to create more affordable housing, and particularly in our cities across Canada. So that's kind of the big kind of macro level policy. I think though you could go beyond that, because homelessness is really we focus on homelessness as a concept, as a state, a situation that people are in, but it's really the face of poverty in our country, in the face of extreme poverty. Because, I mean, we know there's all people of all ages, there's men, there's women, there's young people, there's families who end up homeless. The one thing they all have in common, there might be different triggers and things that got them there, but if you step back, the most common part of their homelessness is they're poor people. They don't have. If you had the money to, if you get evicted from a place and you have money, then you'll go get another place very quickly. But if you're in a state of homelessness and you don't have the money, then you're cooked. You can't get back into housing very quickly. So it's affordable housing, but it's also poverty, and I also think it's growing poverty that we've had, and there's a whole debate about that. And I know, that there's been some inroads, particularly for families, not for single people, but for families, through the Canadian Child Benefit that has decreased poverty. And having said that, I'm certainly looking at the numbers of family homelessness. I don't see huge inroads in terms of reducing that subgroup of people. So those are the big, I think, macro issues: affordable housing, making it available, and poverty. I think there's other policies. I mean, certainly when we look at homelessness, there's the whole child welfare system and how people graduate coming out of child welfare. We know that's a driver of homelessness. Among our youth, it's probably half really have histories of contact with the child welfare system. And we also know that among adults, and again, this touches on policy, is the way our mental health systems have evolved on the over time, as we've moved away from psychiatric institutions, which have closed across Canada. we haven't put in place, and this is a policy level issue, we haven't put in place the kind of supports that people need to, to live in the community, support them in their housing, but also to build a life in the community. And there I'm talking about people with severe and persistent mental illness.